Great. Great. Hope you guys have had an enjoyable experience so far. Hope you are excited about your elected positions. What we do in this convocation is our keynote speaker convocation. With that being said, we usually invite a elected representative within the state of Louisiana to come and speak to all of you every year and explain what he does, how he thinks you can better serve in your high schools, in college, in your community, and we do a Q&A afterwards. So I'm going to hand over the mic to Staff Adjunct Ethan Champagne to introduce our speaker.
Right, so our representative today is Stephen Ortega. Stephen Ortega is the youngest serving member of the Louisiana House of Representatives. He was elected in 2011, and within months of being sworn into office, Ortega became the leader in the legislature for energy and cultural economy initiatives. He has also led the way towards education reform based around the health of the students. This first session produced legislation such as the pilot program between Lafayette University Medical Center and the Lafayette Parish School System. Legislation requiring the state agencies to purchase vehicles that run natural gas and propane legislation promoting the use of Louisiana native. Ortega was raised in Jericho, Louisiana, near Lafayette. After graduating from Jericho High School, he went on to earn a Bachelor and Master of Architecture from Tulane University in New Orleans. While at Tulane, Ortega served as the Catholic missionary leader in Honduras, where he designed and built homes. He is the co-founder of Eco Lafayette, a design build firm specializing in energy-efficient homes in India. Currently, his design and build projects include single-family, multi-family, and office reuse. He is also working in the Make It Right Foundation, an organization focused on rebuilding the ninth ward of post-Katrina villages. Gentlemen, Representative Ortega.
Morning. Morning. Y'all tired yet? No. So, one interesting thing about me is that I was actually sitting where you are 12 years ago, and I was at this point. I guess I was already elected to the state senate. So, how many people are in the state senate? Yeah. So I just wanted to ask y'all, because later I actually ran for lieutenant governor, and I lost the race for lieutenant governor. How many people, raise your hands, have lost the race so far? That's a lot. So one of the things I wanted to talk to y'all whenever I was thinking about it was about losses and about courage, and having the courage to get back up again and try it again. Because even though I didn't win lieutenant governor whenever I was in y'all's position, less than a decade later, I was a state representative, the youngest member of the House of Representatives. And so I just wanted to give you a real quick story. When I was 23 years old, because I know y'all are really into the election process right now. When I was 23 years old, I decided it would be a good idea to run for an open position in the House of Representatives. I was just finishing up my master's degree at Tulane, and I thought, why not? So me and my friends got together and we made a float, and we rode a Mardi Gras float in the Karen Crow Parade with a big banner announcing that I was running for state representative. So I was running against three guys, and all three of these guys actually had been in politics longer than I had been alive. So it takes a lot of courage to stand up and do something like that, although it sometimes takes naivete too. So we ran and ran and ran. We knocked on doors. We knocked on thousands of doors. Tons of my friends helped me. And then election night came. We even set up a war room, and we were going to watch all of the poll numbers come in. We had somebody at every single poll in every single precinct in the district, and they would call in as soon as they posted up the numbers. And we were sitting there with an Excel spreadsheet, and we fill it in, fill it in, fill it in. And as they were coming in, we started getting really, really excited because it looked like more and more that I was going to be in a runoff with the former state representative who was there before, which was kind of understood whoever got in the runoff with him was going to have a good chance to win. The last 3 precincts came in, and I found myself under by about 200 votes. And I was so disappointed. I said, "Well, call everyone back. Maybe they read it wrong. Maybe we messed up something in the Excel file." Well, whenever the final numbers came in, our numbers were right, and I lost the race by about 220 votes. But, like I said, sometimes you have to have courage to stand back up again. When I was 27 years old, 4 years later, decided to get up and do it again. This time I was running against a guy who had been the parish president longer than I had been alive. So here we go again. Knocked on lots of doors. We knocked on about just under 9,000 doors. I had a lot of volunteers. This time I was able to raise more money because I was more established in my career. And we ran lots of commercials and television. But the thing different about this race than the last race was not only was I running against the parish president, but I also had the governor getting involved. And I also had him attacking me. And then I had a United States senator getting involved and him going after me. And then finally a congressman comes in and gets involved in the race. And I'm like, this is just a small race in my little area. What's going on? Why are all these people, why do they care so much? So I went and made a television commercial in the last 10 days and stood up to all of them. And I called them all out. And I said, I'm the guy, the governor, the United States senator, and the congressman are trying to beat. And I said, I'm trying to do this to go and be your voice in Baton Rouge and nobody else's. And I ended up winning. I won by 10%. It was an exciting night. So, I had some notes here, just to bear with me. So, after, I just wanted to say a few things real quick on courage. Because courage goes a long way in leadership. And as young men, we're all called to be courageous. We're all called to do courageous actions. We're called to be courageous by standing up for those without a voice. We're called to be courageous by taking risks for others. We're also called to be courageous for fighting for things such as social justice or fighting overseas. We have with us along the side over here many men who are very courageous. Y'all want to stand up real quick? I think y'all should applaud these guys. It really takes a lot of courage to serve your country in the capacity that they did. I have a special place in my heart for the American Legion because my grandfather was extremely involved in it in his hometown of Washington. Is there anyone here from St. Landry Parish? Yeah, awesome, cool. I think I see some people from my district here too, with like Scott, Karen Crow area. Awesome, good to see y'all. So one other thing on courage. Sometimes you have to stand up, and sometimes life throws you things very quickly. Literally the first full day after a day I was sworn into office, I was called into a meeting, and I'm sitting there with a bunch of people from our area in the Lafayette area who are state representatives and senators, and I'm sitting next to a friend of mine now, a state senator, and we're in a meeting with the director or the secretary of the Department of Health and Hospitals and 2 former directors of the Department of Health and Hospitals, and we're talking about the cuts that were coming down to the charity hospitals midway through the budget. And I remember whenever my friend and colleague passed me a sheet of paper, and they had a list on it of all the different things that were going to be cut in the charity hospital, including pediatrics and HIV/AIDS treatment, detox units, and I was like, man, what are we going to do? Before you know it, I started getting phone calls in my office. I had a contractor who has 7 adopted children, almost all of whom are special needs, who are very dependent on the pediatrics in that charity hospital. I had someone come to me who's an optometrist who said, there's this lady in Opelousas, she's a seamstress, and because they cut the charity hospital, she can't go and get the proper treatment for her diabetes anymore, and she's starting to go blind. And I thought, man, this is, when we strip people of that sort of dignity where they can't even do their own job anymore, fall into disability. And then I had a colleague of mine in the house, his barber was waiting for a very minor heart procedure and ended up dying. So he lost his barber. So it was really serious times. And we had to act quickly on trying to figure out how to get certain necessary things restored into that charity hospital. So one of the other things was my first day in my first session in the legislature. Life throws you something, you have to stand up and be courageous. I literally got my feet wet because they had a 500-year storm event in my district where over 1,000 homes were flooded. So I had to leave my first day of the legislature, drive all the way back, and I got into boats with people. I was trying to help people who were stranded on these islands. But it was having the courage to stand up and go and do that sort of stuff. So we're still dealing with a lot of those flooding issues, and every day having to fight for money for those projects to make sure that the drainage is improved. So as I said, or as Ethan Champagne said, I'm born and raised I was actually born in Opelousas, raised in Caring Grove. And so I'm very, very proud of my Cajun and Creole culture. And so it's one of the things that I've really used to kind of define a lot of the things that I fight for in the legislature. So I'll talk a lot about the cultural economy. I talk about our heritage, talk about how it's so important. One of the things that I learned whenever I was y'all's age was that whenever I started getting around and realizing the diversity of the state and how different we are from different places, and even from one parish to the other, how much it can change. And one thing I noticed whenever you read the history books, you see that we were populated with mostly refugees. We had Acadians, Haitians, West African slaves, French, Germans, Italians, Irish, more recently Lebanese, Vietnamese, Laotian, and then don't forget about those who were here before us, the Native Americans like the Houma, the Choctaw, the Chitimacha, the Tiwi, the Biloxi, et cetera, et cetera. I think some of those are actually maybe y'all's parish names, some of the Native American names. But culture is so important to me that my first piece of legislation, and I think y'all are going to like this because it sounds like something you would have done in Boise State. We passed a resolution, and the resolution declared Scott, Louisiana, the boudin capital of the world. I know that sounds funny, but I actually had people asking me to do that before I was even elected. So I was just doing what people elected me to do. They asked me to do it, I'm going to go and do it. But I sat down with the mayor one day and he said, we got to make it the boudin capital of the world. We're going to market it. We're going to start a festival. We're going to do all this stuff. I said, hold up. We have to have numbers. I said, I want to know how many pounds of boudin were produced in Scott. Okay, so we went and found it out. 1.6 million pounds of boudin a year. Then I said, okay, how many people are employed directly because of jobs because of boudin in Scott? 84. 84 people have jobs because of boudin. I said, okay, let's look at like how many millions of dollars does it produce? Oh, like almost $6 million a year. Shoot, the mayor figures out and calculates the amount of tax money that they make from it. He says, we just built this new fire station with money, with tax dollars just for boudin. Said, okay, we got some good arguments, let's go. So over half of those 84 employees show up with t-shirts. Never underestimate the power of t-shirts in a committee room. So we come and we have it in the committee room, we fill it up, I sit down at the table, I bring the mayor, we lay it all out, and they ask us, a couple questions. Well, are you sure you're not going to call it? Do we have jurisdiction over the whole world? Well, I don't know. I said, we have a state agency that deals with French language and talking to other French-speaking countries. I said, we'll let them talk to France if they get upset because we have the Buddha capital. Then we got it out of the committee as it's coming to the floor. If y'all know a little bit about the process, it's got to go to the committee, it's reported favorable, it comes to the floor of the House, and then it does the same thing on the Senate side. So it comes to the floor of the House that morning. The mayor gets there, and I get handed this sheet of paper, which is a copy of a microfilm. Y'all probably don't even know what microfilm is. They know what microfilm is. And it was from a 1974 article in the American Press in Lake Charles saying that Jennings was declared the Buddha capital of the universe. So the state representative from Jennings gets all upset. And when it comes to the floor, I told the mayor, we're going to push it through anyway. We're going to push it through anyway. I think we have the votes, we're going to push it through. So right away, sure enough, the very back stands up the representative from Jennings. He says, I hate to bust your bubble, but this has already been done before. Jennings is the Buddha capital of the universe. And I said, his name is Johnny Gwynn. I said, Representative Gwynn, I said, we're not looking for the universe today, we're just looking for the world. So then he starts arguing more and more about the past, this, the past that. I said, Representative Gwynn, with all due respect, this resolution is not about the past, it's about the future. So we got huge applause, went up for a vote. I had everyone vote for it except for about 18 people, including the Speaker of the House voted against because he's from Lake Charles, and so he was defending Jennings, I guess. But, which is, by the way, usually when the Speaker of the House votes some way, a lot of people follow him, so I was very lucky to only have lost 18 votes. But, so then I get in my car the next day to go to the legislature, and I turn on the radio to National Public Radio, NPR, and I hear my voice. I turn it up a little bit, and then I hear Johnny Quinn's voice. Turn it up again, and I'm listening, and I'm sitting there in the car listening to this. And then all of a sudden, here comes one of these ladies who can't even pronounce Boudin. She's like, Boudin, from National Public Radio. I'm like, this is a joke. I must be dreaming. The next day, I get this phone call from a guy who says, this is so-and-so with the Wall Street Journal. We want to do an article about the Buddha capital of the world. And I said, you've got to be joking, right? And he goes, no, I'm flying into Lafayette on Friday, and we want to interview you and the mayor and other people who live in town. We ended up making the cover of the Wall Street Journal. Of course, people made fun of us. They said, "Oh, well, some places they argue about how many PhDs in a town, and here we are. There's 3 towns feuding about who's the Buddha capital of the world." Of course, then there was a great response on the blog where someone said, "Some places have so many people who are educated that they can actually talk about culture." So, one thing that I'm very proud of Louisiana and our culture, and I think that we should harvest it more. In Scott, they actually have had 2 years now since we did that. They've actually started the Boudin Festival. They had over 35,000 people at the Boudin Festival the last 2 years. So you can imagine how many more millions of pounds of Boudin people are purchasing in Scott. They're coming up with whole new. It's like we're creating our own new culture. Now they have Boudin pie. They already have Boudin balls. Now they have Boudin balls with a piece of cheese in the middle of it. So it's like it's always inventing new things. So going back to I guess a little more serious on culture. One of the things that I passed this past legislative session that I'm very, very proud of is making it a right for every parent or every student who are entering kindergarten or first grade to be able to enter into French immersion, which is really important. There's 6,000 people in immersion right now across the state in 9 parishes, and there was over 500 students who were waitlisted last year. People would call my office really upset because they had thought since they had their child they were going to put their kid in French immersion because their parents spoke French or their grandparents spoke French, and they wanted their children to have that as a right. So one of the things we fought the School Board Association, and we passed it in both chambers, and the governor signed it into law. So we're actually the first state where bilingual education is now a right. It's a homegrown program, and when we talk about education reform, I'm a big believer to look at what we're doing right and do more of it instead of trying to reinvent everything every couple of years, which seems like we do all the time. So, I guess there's 4 things that I noticed that my test scores were better. By the way, 30% better test scores for those who were in immersion in 8th grade. Why not do more? Early childhood education, kindergarten, produces much better test scores. Dual enrollment in high school. How many people are dual enrolled? That is awesome. That just shows you, because y'all are like the smartest ones in the state. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm questioning that now. So almost everybody raised their hand that's dual enrollment. And then the other thing is something that I've been fighting for, and I think next year we're going to do some pilots across the state, maybe 5 or 6 parishes. It's called a coordinated school health and wellness program, and it's geared mostly towards elementary school. What we're finding is, especially in older schools, that very many people they either can't see forward, they need glasses, or some of them actually need hearing aids, and they're being told they're stupid. And for years they're told that, even though really they just need something simple like eyeglasses. So that's one of the things that we're trying to push, and one of the things I'm working on in the off season. So there's the reason why I think education is really important is I'm from a family of teachers, but I used to be a Catholic missionary in Honduras during the summers. I used to run mission trips down there for two Lights Catholic Center. And I'll always remember this moment one time when I was sitting in the car with the lady who helps us, who I think is a living saint. And I asked her, I said, Nina, this is the second poorest country in our hemisphere. How can you see what's the best way to help get your people out of poverty? By the way, it takes courage to stand up to those who don't have as much of a voice. She looked at me, and I'm thinking education, because I'm from a household of educators. And she says, healthcare. And I was so confused, and I asked her, well, why is that? She said, well, if they're sick, they can't learn. And our biggest problem in this country is they're sick, and they end up missing school, or their parents are sick. And I realized, and that's the same thing in our country too, in certain communities. So that's one of the reasons why I really want to push this coordinated school health and wellness. It's the link. Because there's 3 things I've noticed in our budget in Louisiana that we do. We educate, we medicate, and we incarcerate. And I also realize that if you don't medicate, then you probably can't educate. And if you don't educate, then you're going to have to incarcerate. So I just think it's better to spend the money on the front end than the back end. It just makes sense to me. So on courage, I just wanted to kind of close it out real quick with a couple more interesting legislation that I tried to pass this year. We talked about courage and getting back up and trying again. So even though I've been telling y'all about sometimes having failures, sometimes having success, sometimes failing and coming back and succeeding. So I'm going to tell y'all a little bit about a piece of legislation that it reminded me so much of something that would be in Boise State. And it was brought to my attention by one of my constituents who was very, very passionate that Louisiana was one of 10 states that banned the sale of raw milk as non-pasteurized milk. The milk straight from the cow, fresh. And I said, well, that should be easy. I mean, Texas doesn't ban it, Arkansas, Mississippi, we're one of only 10. So I'm thinking this is going to be easy. So I filed a piece of legislation. Before you know it, I had all the big ag people coming after me, all the special interest groups coming after me. And I realized very quickly that it was a national conversation about food rights versus consumer protection. And people got really passionate about it. So I started hearing all these things. Farm Bureau at first started kind of pushing back on it. And then we were getting people calling my office, all excited about it, who are farmers. And I said, ask them, does that mean my time's up? No. So I asked them, are you a member of Farm Bureau? Yes. Call your Farm Bureau. So they backed off. But then I had the Commissioner of Agriculture, who was big time against this piece of legislation. I'm thinking, it's just milk. Let people buy milk if they want to buy milk. So the Commissioner of Agriculture shows up in the Agriculture Committee testifying against the bill. But I had been working the bill. I had been trying to make sure I had my votes lined up. I had been working with my co-author who was on the bill. He was helping me too. And we knew we had the. And one day I walk in and one of the guys says, man, you got that Farm Bureau people that they're all trying to lobby against me to put pressure. I said, well, you're not going to waive for me now. You're one of my votes to get it out of the committee. And he says, hell no. He says, I looked at him and I said, you ain't a man till you get down on your 2 knees and grab that cow by the teeth and squirt you some raw milk. It's amazing the stories you get from raw milk, by the way. The same representative a couple weeks later walks up, puts his arm around me, and I'm talking to some other representatives and some pages, and he says, man, what kind of world we live in these days? You got that almond milk. I'm like, man, this is going, I don't know where this is going. He says, it's really expensive. I mean, think about how hard it is to milk an almond. Because they had hardly got any teeth on an almond. Then one of the representatives comes up to me and says, man, you heard about that blonde lady? I said, what are you talking about? She says, man, she heard that milk was really good for her skin. So she put out a sign for the milkman who was delivering every week that she wanted 10 gallons of milk. I said, really? And he says, yeah, the milkman calls her and says, man, are you sure you want 10 gallons of milk? You don't want just one? She says, oh no, I heard it's real good for your skin. I'm going to bathe in it. He says, well, ma'am, would you like that pasteurized? She says, oh no, sir, I want it right up to here. I'm going to splash it on my office. So then the calls start coming in. Calls. When you start hearing your constituents, it's really fun. So I get one lady, she calls me, she says, my 2 children are lactose intolerant, but they can tolerate raw milk. I didn't even know that 80%, 70 or 80% of people who are lactose intolerant can tolerate raw milk. I didn't know that. We learned some stuff. And she says, but I feel like a criminal. I'm thinking, well, she technically is if she's buying raw milk. She says, every Wednesday, I meet my farmer in the parking lot, and I feel like I'm doing a drug deal. I exchange cash for the white stuff. I thought, okay, this is a really good deal because we're making this poor lady into a drug dealer or purchaser of drugs. And all she's trying to do is nourish her 2 children who are lactose intolerant. So we get it to the floor. We actually rolled in raw milk and cookies. We even had raw goat's milk ice cream made and served to the legislature to kind of grease the vote, you know. We did the same with the food now, by the way. So you gotta get it in minutes. So we ended up passing it on the floor, 77. to like 18 or something, even though the Commission of Agriculture was against it. But it's smooth sailing. The press is writing about it. They're loving it. We get to the committee on the Senate side, and people are like walking in, walking out. It's like nobody in there. These poor people have come to testify. They're farmers from North Louisiana, from South Louisiana. They're goat farmers. They're cow farmers. They're just farmers. There's a dietitian, a registered dietitian there. And I put raw milk on the table. I even drank it at one point in the committee after they claimed it was poison and that people could get sick. Because there is actually a slightly higher risk of getting sick, but it's no less than oysters or actually we found lettuce and greens had a higher risk. But I always remember this, the farmer from North Louisiana sat down and he said, I'm a United States Marine and I'm taking off today because I'm coming to fight for the rights of American people that should have never been taken away. And then he goes through a whole list of reasons why we should allow the sale of raw milk. At the end he says, in the Bible, when God led the Israelites to the land of milk and honey, he did not tell them to boil their milk first. It made it in the paper too. So we ended up losing. Then I'm like, man, we could find another bill and attach an amendment. I'm not giving up. So we went and we staged this thing where we realized that one of these bills was about pies, the sale of pies in a house. And I said, man, that's a perfect bill. I asked the staff to look at it. Could we do something with it? I got a senator on the other side to attach an amendment. All it did was change the temperature from 45 degrees to 41 degrees. And we threw it back to the House. I went and asked the guy, hey, we don't need your bill anymore. There was another bill that passed. Can you do this? Do a favor. He loved it. He ran with it. And so he rejects the Senate amendment to change it from 45 degrees to 41 degrees for the pies. And we sent it to a conference committee. I had all my votes lined up on the conference committee to throw it back on the Senate floor and on the House floor and have another vote. It ended up not in the conference committee because people tell you sometimes things and they don't do it. So, but never give up. It takes courage. Fighting for people every day, whether it's serious, whether it's fun. You always have to have that courage. We're all called to be courageous and to stand up for other people, our families, our communities, and just remember that it ain't over until the cows come home.
Follow the JCs in the middle of the room and flank off to either side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have Q&A. So we're going to try and have this as organized as possible. If you do have a question, please come up to the podium and ask your question in front of the mic. Please make sure it is appropriate. We are live streaming at the moment. And if you have any specific question, whether it's from politics, Louisiana, personal life, just please come up and we encourage JCs, PCs, SCs, but especially citizens. So now I open up the floor for questions. Just make a line.
So what made you want to pursue a career in politics?
Okay, so the question is what made me want to pursue a career. I'm actually, by trade, I still do design, build houses and for people as well as urban design, like neighborhoods people live in. And so my real career, I think, is still design, build stuff. But I do see it as sort of like a second career in politics. And I wanted to be an architect when I was 5 or 6. I was playing with Legos. And then I started getting kind of into politics when I was maybe 9 or 10, and I would listen to things on the radio and watch television. And then I'm one of those guys who just can't sit still, and I've got to be active in my community. And if I'm not doing stuff in my community, I'm frustrated. So I thought like being in the House of Representatives would be a good position to get stuff done. And it seems to be, it seems to still frustrating because you just can't wait for that you want to get stuff done. But it does help me a lot to do that sort of stuff.
Thank you.
So, like, your education in architecture, how has that, like, played into your career as a representative?
So, my education in architecture, I'm one of only 2 people with architecture education in the House of Representatives. One thing I noticed that's really great about it, it's kind of like you learn a little bit of everything. Whether you're working with building codes, which is law, or you're working with professional licensure, which is also something totally different. Business, designing for like socioeconomic, designing whole neighborhoods. It sort of gives you a little bit of everything, which is very similar in the legislature. You end up having to be an expert at, or at least act like you're an expert at everything, or go and have to research a lot of stuff. I didn't know so much about milk until this session, so they joke and say that architects know a little bit about a lot, and that you learn more and more about. No, you learn less and less about more and more, and eventually you know nothing about everything, which I think the legislature is very similar.
Do you believe it more important to represent your constituents' views or what you believe is right within the legislature?
That's a really, really good question. Kind of reminds me of the book Profiles in Courage, at least the beginning of Profiles in Courage by John F. Kennedy, where it's sort of this balance, where you have to balance, you're elected to represent people, but at the same time you have to, there's a certain point where you might be put in a position where it's very hard because it's your conscience versus what you know the people that don't want. I tend to line up with my district a lot on my conscience, so it's a little bit easier than I think some of the other guys in there. But there have been times where I voted a certain way. I felt like it might have not been smart politically, but for me to go home at night, I thought it was the right thing to do. So it definitely is a balance. It depends on what the vote is, at what point it gets into the details. So there's been other times where I voted in my constituency where I didn't really care to vote that way, one way or the other. So it's a balance. It's very hard.
What do you think are the keys to making a good first impression with your constituents, whether it be like a one-on-one conversation or an interview where everybody's considered?
I think in campaigning, one of the best things, especially on my side, is door to door. When people see that you're out there knocking on their door, you're asking for it. And really, the number one thing is to introduce yourself and just ask them for their vote during the election. When you're not in an election, it's sort of just asking them, just talking to them, and showing them that you're one of them too, and trying to get feedback from them on certain things. Yeah, I guess trying to call them back is really hard too because you get so many.
What is your what's your favorite part about representing the people of Louisiana?
Are you like the new cheerleader? You're losing your voice already. So what did you say? The favorite part about
representing the people?
I think one of the best parts about Louisiana, representing Louisiana, is it's a very interesting state because I talk about diversity. When you're in the legislature, you realize just how diverse the state is because you have people sitting next to you who are it's just not the same as the people back home. You know? So it makes for really fun times. I just always had a heart for my country and a heart for Louisiana, and I'm very proud of who we are. So it's, I guess, just in general, having that instilled in me makes it the best thing.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your work on the raw milk procedure. That was extremely important in my family. We discuss it every night at dinner table.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Did you discuss it over a glass of raw milk?
Yes, we did actually on one occasion. I have a question for you about your Boise State experience. Do you feel like the procedures and activities which you experienced at Boise State would be representative of a crash course for those of us who want to actually proceed into legislative positions when we grow up?
Yes, absolutely, because I think at this point in my life when I was here, it was probably the most I was exposed to the nitty-gritty of how it works. Although there are a few things different here, because it's more of a nationwide program, there's a few things that are different here than in real life in Louisiana. One thing would be that the party politics is a little bit different because we have what they call the jungle primaries, which is something that our Constitution in the 70s is, I guess, a primary where everybody enters no matter what their party is, and the two-front vote getters get the runoff, or if someone got over 50%. So that makes it a lot different from running for the Nats or the Feds. So there's a few things different on that. As far as passing legislation and stuff, it's very similar also. But yeah, no, I think it's a great crash course, especially in high school.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alex, and what would you say is the most challenging or frustrating moment for you in the House of Representatives?
So the most challenging and frustrating moment, there's a lot of those. I mean, every day it's like literally, if you're getting bored, you just wait like 2 minutes and it's going to change. There's so many subjects just coming at you. I think one of the more frustrating things is whenever you have to keep on trying to educate people on something and saying, this is really what it is, this is really what it is, and having to keep on doing it constantly. And sometimes it takes years to pass legislation. There's a joke one of my colleagues always says, it takes for bad legislation to pass, or if it's bad legislation, it passes easy, and if it's good legislation, it takes years. So I guess that's my biggest frustration.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, who's Kyle?
My God, you lost your voice too.
Yeah. I used to go to your big education here. So I was wondering, like, I'm not really sure what your background is on, but like, what's your opinion like on the move to Common Core in the education system?
I'm not on the education committee, so I didn't get to hear the whole debate on Common Core, but I do hear it just because I'm around it. The way I see it is it's a set of standards that the states have sort of come together and said we want to adopt these standards. There's a lot of misinformation out there about how it's being pushed down from the federal government, but there are some problems with it, I think. Some of the things are because it takes away curriculum and says to the teachers, you make your own curriculum, and then it gives you suggestions of material for your curriculum. And some of that material might not be appropriate for certain age groups, which has been the biggest complaint, I think. One thing that the Department of Ed is doing is trying to come up with a Louisiana-specific set of materials that teachers can choose. I think it's going to just take time. I know a lot of teachers are used to having a set curriculum. Some of them are going to continue with that same set curriculum as long as it follows the standards that come with, which to me, it's like reading, writing, and arithmetic. So,
And also, you plan on going like any further, like on totem pole?
Do I plan on going any further up on the totem pole? I think in politics, a lot of it's about timing. So if there's an opportunity, I would consider it, depending on where I am in my life, where I am in my career, and what the position is if I really want it. So I think it's just like I'm constantly campaigning for re-election right now. And if something else opens up, I'll figure it out at that time.
Thank you.
I got moved up to the front of the line. Thank you, guys. We had a question as Legionnaires.
Okay.
You're a former Boy Stater. When you campaign, do you advertise the fact that you are a Boy Stater?
Actually, the first time I did say I had like a list of different things I did, and I did have something about Boy State. Second time, I learned that people don't read all that stuff, so we were only less than 100 words, and so when we got to less than 100 words, we were touching more on like a biography than it was like a list of things that I've done.
That's not a good example.
But I do talk about a lot about it on my social media, and about how great of a program it is.
Just trying to give you a hard time, really. We do appreciate what you've done. Thank you so much. But remember, include a Boy State.
Include Boy State. What about Girl State?
Thank you, sir.
It's noted, but
Honorable King Bears.
King Bear.
Yeah, I have a little two
Where's King Bear? I know we had 64 Bears. I don't remember. I'm just joking. I know that they don't have real parishes.
I'm checking. So first of all, this is a two-part question. I used to live in Scotland when I was younger, and I love seeing the achievements and the growth over time. Do you know what they're doing in the future with the tax money that they're getting from the FS and capital growth?
Yeah, the city of Scotland is growing really fast right now. And it has some really good leadership that I've really worked a lot with. We actually, one of the bills that I passed this last session was to allow the council, we had a unanimous vote to send a vote to the people to, if they wanted to do more of a hotel-motel tax, because they've been building a lot of hotels. And all of that money would be going towards tourism efforts, but more specifically towards a 4-H arena that we're trying to get built in Scott on the interstate. The city has the property and everything. The other thing that you'll probably see in the next 6 months for the big breaking ground of the extension of Apollo Road and Rue de Bellier, and that'll be a 4-lane road with bike path and everything. So, and we're going to do like what they call an overlay district, so that people have to build something a little bit better than just let it go out on anything. But yeah, that's probably the two biggest things, is that extension of that road, which is going to open up a lot of development, and the 4-H arena, and then continuation of the Boudin Festival.
That's really awesome. And second part, have you tried the pepper jack Boudin Falls Mills?
I did have the pepper jack here in Boston.
It's big.
It's awesome.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for a great speech. Now for my question. So for those of us interested in like running for office in the state, like what would you recommend you start like a campaign with? Like how do you get a campaign started?
How do you get a campaign started? Let me think back. So the first time was different from the second time, because the second time I kind of had built a foundation. I think the first thing that I did was I got friends to say, hey, I'm going to help you with this. Getting material together, which includes like this really boring photo shoot that you change photos a million times in Louisiana. The material that you hand out from door to door, you can get databases where you actually are logging who your supporters are so that you can make sure that they show up to the polls. Those are the cheaper things that you can do, the grassroots stuff. And then the other thing is just raising money. As a candidate, you have to be able to ask for money. It's like the worst part of politics. Like it's once you get used to it, it's a little bit better. But you have to make the ask, because if you never ask, they don't. Some people actually want to be asked, you know? But if you never ask, they'll never give it to you. And having money is kind of like if I didn't speak with this microphone, I just talked to y'all like this, and I don't have the money to buy a microphone. Nobody hears me. But whenever I buy a microphone, then I can get my voice way out over there. So it takes money to run a campaign so that your voice can be heard. Okay, thank you.
How you doing?
Good.
Lost my voice. So I was just wondering, when times got rough and like it was kind of stuff kind of got rocky, what did you hold on to? Like, what did you keep to yourself to keep going?
What does that keep to myself? It's a really good question. I think when things get rocky, I've had from a very young age, I had to I guess stand up to adversities. I think my faith is one. I think just maintaining just health, like just running, and I actually do triathlons. I think like my faith and exercise are probably the best things to sort of get through those rough spots. It sort of irons it out a little bit, although it's still rough. And then I also think like family, just staying close to family and having really good friends and people who are good.
Okay, so state elections are coming up, and Chaponga Parish is pretty much like we're trying to get through them. So, what are some tips on running for a state office?
Okay. Chaponga Parish. I think y'all all knew that. I don't know. I think in this situation, it's a little bit different from real life, but I think reaching out and trying to find allies is probably the best thing. And also giving an awesome speech. That's like the way to hammer it on. Like you want to go try to get your votes lined up first, but you got to remember that you could lose your votes if you don't have them.
Okay.
You lost your voice too.
Pretty much completely on, but he asked about speeches. My question is kind of related to that. What do you think is some good advice, or like what's the best way to like make your speech stand out? Would it be like creativity above everything else, or just
I would say grabbing people's attention, whether it be with creativity or something otherwise, and then I guess hitting the high points and keeping it kind of organized. I guess I don't know. You gotta ask everyone else like what would make them want to vote for you.
And I'm just curious, what's your favorite bill or legislation that you have to try and pass?
Man, I like every bill is different. Some of them are like really easy because they like if it's a local bill, like this thing I was talking about, Scott. It's pretty easy because nobody's gonna fight you on something that's only in your area. But the milk bill was actually very educational, even though to a lot of people on the surface it doesn't seem like a big deal. It ended up being a bigger deal than I thought. And I had to deal with press in a different way than I ever had to deal with. And I guess one of the more fun ones too was doing stuff with natural gas and propane. I actually had to fight the chairman of the finance committee, which has a lot of power in the legislature, because he didn't want my bill to go through requiring all new state vehicles to run on propane or natural gas, because in the 70s he he had a problem with his tractor in propane, so I had to educate people on how much it's changed. But I just thought it was a really important thing because I guess it was really cool because I found an issue that seemed to work on the right, worked on the left. It worked to save taxpayer dollars. It worked to use Louisiana's natural resources. We're the #1 producer of natural gas in the country, #2 of propane in the country. And then lastly, it was also environmentally friendly at the same time, more so than oil and gas. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
I was wondering, what college did you go to and why did you choose that college?
I went to Tulane University. Tulane. Yeah, I actually chose it more for the architecture program. I was looking more at the programs. I think that makes a lot of sense because that's where you're going to spend most of your time when you go to college. So if you know what your major is going to be, try to find a university that has a good program in that. And there's so many universities out there. It's a hard decision, but I think secondly it would be sort of what does the school have to offer outside the classroom? What are the people like? Because you're going to learn more in college outside of the classroom from the experience of being in college than even inside the classroom. You learn from the other people, your classmates, outside the classroom. So,
Hi, I'd like to first of all thank you for taking your time out today to come talk to us and such. But second, Louisiana sadly is, in comparison to other states, is not that good in education really. And I was wondering, there's a law in Louisiana code that allows teachers to teach theories that are contrary to that of evolution, such as intelligent design or creationism. And I was wondering how we can expect to excel in science education if we're teaching theories that are not accepted by the scientific community as a whole.
I know exactly which one you're referring to. I was not there when they voted that. And I think my opinions on it are a little bit different from the typical person in the legislature. I don't necessarily think that it's something that you can't teach, but I think that teaching it within under the umbrella of science is not necessarily the right place. And I actually come from it from a different point from my faith. I think that when you start to mix theology and science too much, a lot of people are going to start thinking that science answers the questions of theology when it doesn't. It only brings you to a certain point, and theology brings you to a further point in faith. So I think that the problem with it is that it confuses the issue with most people. So people start using science to answer the questions of theology, or vice versa. So I do think that they should be separate, taught. One as maybe world religions or something like that. People have to, or maybe philosophy. I actually think philosophy should be taught in the schools more. When I got to college and I realized I didn't know anything about philosophy, I was really, really upset that I didn't know basic stuff about like Plato and Aristotle.
Thank you.
I'd like to know, whenever you were in high school, did you join ROTC? And if you had, what was your last known position?
I joined what?
JROTC.
JROTC. Okay, the officer training. I did not. We didn't have it in my high school. We did have it at my university, but when you're in architecture school, it's really hard to do anything other than architecture. I think I knew one other person in my class who did a sport. Nobody did anything else because it's like this culture where you're like locked away. When they give the tours at Tulane, they tell you that this is where the architects go and they never come out for 5 years. So yeah, no, but I think it's a good thing though. people need to realize that ROTC, is specifically for officer training. So it's actually got kind of a higher level, I should say. So I think it's great, especially if you can get your college.
Did you join any other clubs or sports when you were in school?
When I was in high school, I was in a lot of clubs. So in middle school, I did a lot of sports. And then in college, I did get involved in student government, even though I didn't have very much time for it. I represented the architecture school on the student government side. And one of the first things that I pushed for was actually for us to use some of our monies to get unlimited passes on the streetcars and buses and lorries. And we were working with other universities to try to do it too, as a way to improve the mass transit system in New Orleans. But while I was there, right after we had gotten all this stuff through student government, which was cool that we were doing something real in student government, you know. And Hurricane Katrina came and kind of messed everything up. We never really got that back on it. So that's really the only thing I did at Tulane other than my major. Although I did, after Hurricane Katrina, I started doing triathlons, and I didn't really know how to swim. I mean, I knew how to swim, but I didn't know how to swim competitively. So I started learning how to do that. Whenever I came back to Tulane, the swimming pool structure was twisted from the hurricane, and because we were shut down for a whole semester. So I was kind of like trying to find stuff to do, and that's whenever I started doing triathlons. But I found out that we couldn't swim in the pool, but if you joined the swim club, you could actually swim in Loyola's pool. So I ended up joining the swim club, and I learned a lot from guys who had been swimming their whole lives, pretty much. So that was.
Thank you.
How you doing, Sarah? Danny MacArthur, Detachment Commander of the Sons of American. I would like to ask you, are you a descendant of anybody that served in the Great War?
When you say the Great War, you mean World War II?
Well, wars.
And wars. Okay.
Wars, present war.
Both my grandfather and my grandmother served in World War II.
I love. Our Department Commander of the American Navy would like to pay for your dues as a Sons member. You can show us your eligibility.
Okay. That'd be awesome. That's cool. Thank you. I was really involved with the American Legion in Washington, and there's still, when you're driving into Washington, there's like a little blue star. I guess y'all put up the American visit. I don't know the issue, but I remember being a really little kid whenever they put it in there, and being there with them, it was a big deal. And my grandmother was actually a member of the auxiliary. She was a nurse during World War II in New York, and they actually used her for translations whenever the Belgian and the French soldiers came to New York. And my grandfather fought in the Pacific. But she ended up becoming a nurse for the rest of her life because of that experience. So.
Well, all you need with that application, I guess, is a copy of each one of your DB-214s or an officer's chart. And I want to thank you for coming and speaking to the audience of the Voice Game 2014.
Thanks.
I was wondering how you feel, how hard it's been dealing with party politics in the legislature, like having to go against what the rest of the parties supporting or disagreeing with.
Yeah, that's a good question because in Louisiana historically we haven't really been much on parties, partially because we were more like a one-party state, so it ended up being very geopolitical. It's still very geopolitical. In other words, like rural versus urban, or north versus south. It ends up being geography. As a more rural Democrat, I tend to be very much in the center some people call it voodoo, or whatever you call it. I'm voting what I believe is true and what I think most of the people in my district think very similar. So there have been times where I have voted against what my party, at least my party nationally, would say very often. I do find myself very often voting with rural Democrats in the House of Representatives, but all of them are splitting from the National Party in certain things. I'm not a big partisan guy. I think that we spend too much time fighting just because we're going to fight, whereas I think very often you can find something in the middle, find a compromise, and that works better very often than doing nothing because everyone's fighting. Thank you.
Straight from the political side. I just want to ask you about your architecture thing and the whole vision architecture. Do you do that more in the U.S. and like how do they do it?
My first build design was actually in Honduras, on the coast of Honduras. I worked with a group called Caritas, which means charity, or Caritas Internacional. And so my thesis, I guess, was about how the architect can in fact affect the vernacular architecture by working within a new paradigm, all these real big words and stuff. And so the actual test of the thesis was what we built. And so it was really rewarding to actually have a thesis built. And then since then, I actually worked for Make It Right, which is the Brad Pitt project in New Orleans. So that was, I guess, my next sort of architecture for humanity, I guess you could say. And I really enjoyed doing that. I really enjoyed the challenge of trying to design on a very, very, very shoestring budget. I think it's you have to be more creative in some ways. So yeah, I guess does that answer your question? Okay, awesome.
Fellow citizens, asked what you take on gun ownership.
What's my take on gun ownership? I tend to vote very pro-Second Amendment. I actually, I think that there's some sorts of restrictions that have to be there, but sometimes they get a little ridiculous with it. One example is I do a lot of duck hunting. So and I had a really awesome experience where my father and I actually went hunting in northern Quebec, northern Canada, for caribou. And we got us some caribou, and we filled up the freezer. But one thing was, I actually got robbed in my own home New Year's Eve, and people stole all of my guns. So I realized that, there's sometimes guns get into the hands of the wrong people. So what's the solution? I don't know. But if people bring something up that's worth listening to, sure. But yeah, definitely.
What was your most memorable experience when you attended Boise State?
When I attended Boise State, most memorable experience. I think it was like the build-up, and I felt like the sort of whenever we got to the point where we're about to elect the statewide officials, I think that was like the coolest part. Because it's like everything builds up to that, and everyone's like getting excited, and everyone's like cheering already. I think the election of the statewide is probably the coolest moment because it's sort of like the pinnacle of the whole week.
Thank you.
Cool.
One name for your
really great questions. We have representative for no one day. As always, we really appreciate your time and coming. As I'm going to finish you as American Legion and Boy State Council and staff.
I'm good. Cool.
Hey guys, few short words.